Hello Purpose Perceivers, welcome to my channel Purpose Perceived, where we find purpose through philosophy. My name is Stephen. Today I'm discussing 7 of the most common arguments I encounter against veganism and my responses to them. If you're vegan already, maybe you'll find these arguments useful when discussing veganism with non-vegans, and if you're not vegan yet, maybe you'll find these arguments helpful too. As usual, if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe and leave some comments in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. Please share the video if you find the arguments helpful. It really helps to get the message out there about veganism. And without further ado, here we go. We often talk about personal choice when our actions don't directly harm others, but when our actions harm others, we step into the realm of moral responsibility. Where there's a victim, society has a right to speak out. Simply saying it's a personal choice doesn't cut it. We need a rational justification. Think about it this way. If someone recklessly drives under the influence, putting others at risk, we call it wrong. Similarly, if our actions like smoking lead to harm for those around us, those people have a legitimate right to express their concerns to us. Merely categorizing these actions as personal choices, of the driver, of the smoker in this case, is inadequate to justify the potential harm inflicted on others. Likewise, we wouldn't regard a murderer's claim that it was their personal choice to commit murder, or a robber's assertion that it was their personal choice to steal, as valid moral justifications. Merely declaring something as a personal choice doesn't render it morally acceptable. Non-vegans may accuse vegans of being sanctimonious, but here's the core issue. Each year we systematically subject huge numbers of fellow beings to suffering and death, all while humane alternatives are widely available. This isn't just a personal choice. It affects billions of land animals and trillions of sea life, and people have every right to speak out about it. It's not about judging individuals, it's about calling for justice. Most of us grew up with the tradition of eating animals, but consider this. Every form of discrimination in human history has been defended as traditional. Sexism, for instance, is frequently justified with the claim that it's traditional for women to be subservient to men. Similarly, human slavery was a tradition in many cultures at various times. But remember, the fact that behaviour can be described as traditional has nothing to do with whether it's morally justifiable. The critical point here is that the presence of certain behaviours within a culture doesn't in and of itself make them morally justifiable. It's not a matter of whether conduct is rooted in a particular culture. Indeed, all conduct is embedded in some cultural context. The pivotal question, though, revolves around whether the conduct can stand up to moral scrutiny and be deemed morally justifiable. In essence, the cultural origin of an action doesn't inherently render it morally acceptable. Rather, its ethical standing is contingent on a more profound assessment of the consequences and implications of that action and behaviour. In our current society, the belief system of carnism operates so invisibly that we hardly question it. We're taught from a young age that consuming the flesh and products of certain animals is normal, natural and necessary. We're also conditioned to suppress our empathy and the discomfort we feel when animals suffer. We're encouraged to distance meat and animal products from their living sources. Our whole society makes eating animals the easy choice. As we take the initiative to educate ourselves and explore the ethical dimensions, we can start questioning these unconscious belief systems. When we become more informed, we gain the power to make conscious moral choices about our actions. Is the fact that humans possess the ability to eat animal products a sufficient moral justification for doing so? While it's evident that we can consume animals, the real moral question isn't about our capacity to do so, but about necessity. In other words, are we morally obliged to include animals in our diets? The resounding answer to this question is no. We're not obligate omnivores. Our well-being and health do not hinge on the consumption of animals. Ponder, if we're so committed to emulating nature, should we all abandon our modern lives and go live naked in the wild? The reality is our lives are filled with elements far from natural. What about our houses, internet, supermarkets and cars? These are anything but natural. Consider, we've evolved the physical capacity to engage in various actions, including stealing, rape and murder. Does this make these actions moral or obligatory? Of course not. So why would we argue that our ability to eat animals morally justifies our doing so? Eating animals is a choice, not an inescapable mandate. So why selectively choose to emphasise the eating of animals as natural, when our lives are filled with countless other things that deviate from so-called natural behaviour? Should we reject medical treatment, the internet, mobile phones, central heating, and all the other non-natural aspects of our lives based on this logic? Anyway, describing the current practice of commodifying animals as natural is really quite odd. We go to great lengths like stocking supermarket shelves with antibiotic-laden meat encased in plastic, and still we brand it as natural. In truth, our entire system is far from anything one might consider natural, and all motivated by the relentless pursuit of profit. The argument that our ability to eat animals justifies our eating them attempts to reduce morality to nothing, as if our moral choices could be magically erased by evoking nature. The animal is already dead argument often leads people to imagine that these animals magically turn up dead on our supermarket shelves, as if we have no hand in their fate as consumers, and that it would be a waste not to eat them. But the truth is, when we buy animal products, we're not mere bystanders. We're effectively paying someone else to exploit and kill these animals for us. Our purchases create demand, prompting suppliers to produce more. Think of it this way. If you hire a hitman to commit a murder, you are morally responsible for that murder, even though you didn't physically commit the act yourself. Similarly, when we pay others to raise and kill animals for us to eat, we are morally responsible for the suffering and death of those animals, even though we don't personally carry out the physical action. So when we buy animal products, we are directly involved in perpetuating the system, regardless of whether the animal is already dead. If people collectively stopped buying animal products, suppliers would stop producing those products, resulting in fewer animal deaths and suffering. Declaring that the role of animals is to be eaten doesn't automatically make it so or morally justifiable. For example, some people maintain that women should be confined to the kitchen, but asserting that the role of something is X doesn't transform it into a valid argument. Likewise, the argument that the role of farm animals is to be eaten is flawed. It lacks moral grounding. It's a statement without valid ethical justification. Imagine if someone declared that the role of certain ethnic groups is to serve others. Would we seriously accept that as a justifiable role based on this person's declaration? What if someone from another culture claimed that the role of certain animals, dogs or cats, is to be used in rituals? Would we readily agree with that person just because it's their cultural belief? Mere assertions, whether rooted in traditional practices, cultural beliefs, or external proclamations cannot substantiate the ethical legitimacy of a claim. Moral discussions demand strong and reasoned justifications. They cannot rely on unsupported claims or cultural norms to validate a specific role or belief. This one cracks me up. Some people like to argue that animals should be grateful to us for their existence, because we, after all, deliberately brought them into this world. But why does our intent to breed animals for our own consumption bestow upon us the moral authority to treat them as commodities, knowingly subjecting them to suffering and disregarding their intrinsic worth and interest? This argument assumes that animals should be thankful for their existence. It's a bit like suggesting that we create a subservient class of humans who are destined to be used and to suffer, and somehow expect these humans to be grateful to us for creating them. Does the act of producing children grant us the right to exploit or torture those children? Quite the opposite. It emphasises our ethical duty to protect and nurture them. Why then do we assume we have the right to exploit and use animals just because we breed them? Additionally, there's the assertion that consuming animals benefits them because it prevents their potential extinction. However, this argument is also flawed. It neglects the moral consideration of individual animals and sidesteps the inherent ethical questions surrounding their treatment. True, there would be fewer farmed animals if we stopped breeding them for food, and they may even go extinct, but that would also result in far less suffering and exploitation. And the best for last, animals taste good. True, most people derive a lot of pleasure from the taste of meat and other animal products. However, it's important to recognise that finding something tasty is not by itself a valid moral justification for engaging in exploitation and killing that being. When someone insists I could never give up meat, it tastes too good, it's akin to saying I could never cease using child labour who would make my cheap clothes otherwise. In both cases, personal desire takes precedence over the well-being of those affected. These are expressions of desire, regardless of the consequences for the victims involved. If we were to accept that taste alone justifies consuming animals, could future evolved beings apply the same rationale to kill and eat humans? If the appeal of animal products outweighs concerns like slavery, pain, suffering and death, even when we have readily available nutritious plant-based alternatives, the distinction between consuming animals and taking part in practices like bullfighting, dogfighting, cockfighting become less distinct. In all these instances, personal pleasure, either taste, convenience or thrill, take precedence over the needless suffering, pain and death of animals. We should strive to recondition ourselves not to derive pleasure from activities that involve animal suffering, just as we should train ourselves to prioritise reducing suffering and misery and premature death for sentient beings over our personal tastes. Our taste buds are adaptable, and the stereotype that vegan food is bland and tasteless is unfounded. Ultimately, the mere tastiness of someone should not serve as a serious moral justification for ending their life.